You are listening to TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Show, with your host, the Director of Dixie Heritage, Dr. Ed DeVries.
Our guest on last week's TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Show was singer-songwriter Mary Fahl. And Mary was telling us last week about how her ancestry was both Irish and German. And so this week we kind of pick up the conversation where we left off last week, talking about how the Irish in particular has influenced her music. You know, I noticed in your song Going Home and in some of your other music that I've noticed it as well, that there's a lot of Irish in that music. Is the German there as well, and I'm just not seeing it or hearing it or just not listening to the right music or...
Well, you know, it's so funny because I had my ancestry done recently, and I would have assumed that I would, you know, because, you know, in families, you can get different amounts of, you know, just my sister and I have different amounts of our ethnicity, you know, so it's just because you're in the same family, it's like the ingredients of the DNA soup are a little bit different. So I would have thought, because, you know, I'm a singer and you think I'm Celtic and everything, that I would have had all that Irish blood, but no, I have almost none. And I have a huge amount of German. And if in the way I look and, you know, my body type and my face, I take after the German side of my father's family, and completely, you know, so it's interesting. I don't know. I try to write melodies that I feel suit the subject matter. I really, really like having a movie or a book to write about. And I'm often inspired, even if I'm not being commissioned to write for a film. Films really inspire. I don't write from my own life as much as I write for scenarios that come from movies a lot. And I try to, like, you know, when I wrote Dawning of the Day, that's an old Irish melody. I wrote that for a movie called The Guys, which was about a 9/11 fire captain, true story, who lost all of his men. And Sony sent me up to Toronto to work with Michael Dana, who's a, you know, very big film composer. He's won Oscars. He wrote the music for The Life of Pi, et cetera. And I was just sent up there to do some vocalese, you know, over the soundtrack. And I got up there and he played it for me. And I recognized the melody as Dawning of the Day, or it's also called Raglan Road. And I said, that's the soundtrack? And he said, yeah, because it's about firemen and, you know, they have the pipers and they always play Dawning of the Day. I thought it would be appropriate to base the whole score around that melody. So I'm sitting there and I said to him, So I look up, you know, what the real lyrics are to that. And they were kind of, as I said to him, kind of deedle-dee-diddle-dee, and they didn't really suit the subject matter. You know, they didn't have the gravitas that I felt would be appropriate for that subject matter. So I said to him, why don't I write a whole new lyric for this? It would tell the story of that day, 9/11, and what happened to those men, but tell it in a way as if it would sound as if it had been written 300 years ago. Like, make it sound like an old Irish ballad, but I'll tell the story of 9/11. And so he said, well, if you want to do it, you only have about 2 days to write it. So I remember thinking, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? But I did it, and I got it in just under the wire. And but that, you know, in terms of my stuff sounding kind of Irish, that obviously was an old Irish melody. And then I wrote a song about my husband called Gravity, and I would say that has a more of an Americana kind of melody, which was deliberate. I wanted it to sound kind of like Shenandoah, but a lot of those, what we call Americana, comes from Scots-Irish and their music that they brought over. And because, you know, it kind of went into our earliest forms of country music, what we think of as, you know, Appalachian music and the music of the hill country. That comes from Ireland or Scotland, most of it. So it has that very Celtic sound. So when I wrote the song Gravity for my husband, he grew up in Virginia and spent a lot of time in that whole Shenandoah area. So I wanted a melody that sounded like that song, and I've always loved that song anyway. And so it's really just finding a melody that's appropriate to the subject matter. You know, I've written all different kinds of things. So does that answer your question?
It does. You know, you mentioned your husband. I had read his biography as well, and
yeah.
And PhD in marine biology, and maybe the world's foremost expert on the ecology of deep sea hydrothermal vents. So,
yep, he's the guy that goes down he's one of the first people on the submarine called Alvin. It's a little submarine, and he's been down to the very, very bottom of the ocean over 100 times, and he studies those the vents, the undersea volcanoes, and the life forms that grow on them. So he's got his own thing.
Mm-hmm.
I always laugh and say I am not a rock star in my world, but my husband is definitely a rock star in his world.
So, you know, is your husband, is he kind of like a modern day Jacques Cousteau kind of?
Well, yeah. In fact, he's I can brag about him a little bit. He's a very humble guy. He doesn't take himself very seriously, but there's a big oceanic kind of award called the Nogi, and it's a big thing in his world. And there's only been 5 or 6 people who've won that award, and Jacques Cousteau is one of them. Bob Ballard is one of them. Bob discovered the Titanic, and actually he's a good friend of my husband's. And so yes, and my husband has won that award. So yes, he shares the Nogi Award with Jacques Cousteau.
Wow. And I know I saw a video on YouTube, and I guess you were in fact, it's the video on YouTube where you're singing Shenandoah. And
yeah.
Before you sing, you mentioned that you and your husband are going to some type of a college reunion in Virginia. And
yes, he went to University of Virginia. Yeah.
And so you made the comment that you and your husband love all things Jeffersonian.
Oh, my husband is a Jefferson freak. Yes, he loves Jefferson. Thomas, he has little things all over the house and books, and he has a lot of plants. I'm the vegetable garden grower here, and he takes care of all the flowers and shrubs, and he has a lot of flowers, perennials in our garden in the front that all come from Jefferson's garden at Monticello.
Wow.
Isn't that nice?
It is. So the area in Pennsylvania where you live, is it, I thought, well, maybe we're neighbors because I'm in Maryland. And so I thought, well, maybe we're neighbors, but I see you're kind of on the Jersey border.
No. Yeah, we're right. We're right above the Delaware River, and I look across to New Jersey.
So are you in a rural area or a pretty populated area?
Well, it's Easton. So we're south of Easton, right on the border of Bucks County. And so the big town near us would be Easton, Pennsylvania, which is the home of Lafayette College. And but we're south of there. We're a couple of miles south. And it's a beautiful area. There's a lot of Revolutionary War history. And in fact, we live in a house that it's from 1680. And it's been built onto over the years, but the main part of the house was from 1680. And we live on the top of a big hill, but the sliver of land, and there's a big drop off in front of the house, but the sliver of land in front of our house was the road to Philadelphia.
Okay.
Back in the day, back before there was back before Route 611, which goes all the way to Philadelphia from Easton. So a little bit of history there.
So I'm guessing though it's you live in an area that lends itself to kind of the agrarian lifestyle.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, you go a few miles out of Easton, and it's tons of farms all over the place, and we have a nice garden. It's just starting to come up now, and it's very quiet here. We have a lot of privacy, which I treasure.
Right.
It's a luxury these days.
Yeah. Well, I know the property that
I was Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, the property that we're on here in Maryland, the reason that we chose it is because we're surrounded on 3 sides by a commercial nursery, so we have no neighbors for miles.
Oh, that's nice. That's really nice. You know, so it's funny, you know, with all of this quarantine that we all have to endure, I was saying to people, you know, I'll be honest, it really isn't that different. In fact, it's hardly different at all than my normal life. I mean, we have a lot of property around here, and so I'm lucky I can go outside and sit in the sun and work in my garden. And I just, you know, I go down and get my groceries when I have to and go to the farm stand. And the bad part is that I don't get to see my friends, and I don't get to see my mother, who's elderly. That's tough.
Right. How far away is your mother?
My mother is about 2 hours away, and I used to go to see her every single week. And now I can only, I have to wave to her through the window, which is really sad.
Right.
I would like this to be over very soon.
Open your web browser and type in www.barnesreview.org and discover the Barnes Review magazine. In the Barnes Review, you will read vignettes of man, from the prehistoric to the very recent, from forgotten races and civilizations to first-person accounts of World War II and the late Cold War. There is no more interesting magazine published today, nor a more significant and important subject than real history. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review. You can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review magazine in its print form, or in convenient electronic delivery. Our host has been a subscriber to both formats for years. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review.
I know in Michigan it got so bad that people started protesting at the Capitol. The governor of Michigan is kind of doubling down and threatening that she's going to, extend lockdowns just to prove to everybody that she can.
Don't get me started. Okay. My husband isn't home right now, but he would start giving me that look like, cut it, okay? Don't get me started, all right?
I
for us, I mean, my husband is, he has certain immune problems or challenges, and so he's one of those at-risk people.
Right.
But we've always watched ourselves in the winter because my husband doesn't have a spleen. He had Hodgkin's disease when he was a young guy, and so they took out his spleen. So he's immunocompromised, and so we always take care of ourselves and wash our hands, and we've always lived that way and take tons of vitamins and everything. I mean, we're used to that. That's he could die from a flu. He could die from malaria. So it's just par for the course for us.
So when I listened to your song Going Home, I told your agent this, and I don't know if she shared this with you or not, but I have an ancestor. He was my great-great-great-great-grandfather. His name was Micaiah N. Lawrence. He had traveled from Alabama to Texas because he wanted to look at some property in Texas. He was thinking about buying property in Texas. And he buys the property in Texas, and then the war breaks out. And so he enlists in a company in Texas. And he fights for 4 years. And of course, they surrender, surrender in Texas. And he's in Galveston, Texas at this point now for the surrender. But his family's still in Alabama. He has a wife, he has 9 children, and they're all in Alabama. And so he has to walk to Alabama from Galveston, Texas.
Wow. Oh, my God.
Of course, that would be the I-10 corridor, as we know it nowadays. But, back in his day, it was just a series of dirt roads and swamps and, a lot of southern Louisiana is swampland. But he had to walk all of that across, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and then into Alabama.
So he kind of lived the Cold Mountain story.
He had quite a long walk, and, no doubt it took him several months to make it. And then he gets to Alabama, and he reunites with his family, but his farm in Alabama had been totally destroyed by the war. And so now he has a family that is living basically, at the charity of other people on somebody else's land. Carpetbaggers have taken over what had been his farm. But he owns this property in Texas, but he has no money. And so now he and his wife and his 9 children are walking from Alabama back to Texas.
Oh my God.
And so every time I hear Going Home, which is about twice a week, because I've got an MP3. I took all my CDs, I put them into MP3s, and then I put them all on the jump drive and plugged that into the truck. So yeah. I listen to the Gods in General soundtrack probably 2, sometimes 3 times a week. And so, I hear Going Home 2-3 times a week. And every time I listen to it, and this has been for the llast 15 years now, 2-3 times a week, I hear the song. Every time I do, I can envision either my great-grandfather walking from Texas to Alabama going home after the war, or he and his wife and his 9 children walking from Alabama to Texas going to what will essentially be their new home after the war. So that's kind of, what has been my ongoing thought for 15 years. So I guess my relationship with the song is fairly deep. And I know that it's touched other people as well. And, I don't know if you realize just, I know you were saying that you were writing it for the movie and it was kind of a rushed project and you didn't expect to get the opportunity and so forth. And of course, you talked earlier too about all the soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq and different places who were sending you letters as well. For an accident, you really did hit pretty deep with a lot of people, I think.
Well, that's really nice to hear. I'll tell you something else that happened because of that song, is that when, so the version that I had done was very, very simple, upright piano, sound, and but to go with the film, and it was appropriate for them to do this. They incorporated it into the film score, so they included an orchestra and everything, and it was a big production, but that was appropriate for the opening of the movie. So they put that version on my record that came out, and this is the first record that I did. This was The Other Side of Time. It was the first record I had done after my old band October Project, and everybody was expecting that third October Project record that never happened, so this record came out, and it had Going Home on it, which is this big, Civil War extravaganza song, and radio stations, all of these college radio stations that had played October Project did not know what to do with it. And they were like, what is this? And I will say that I lost whatever shred of hipster credibility that I ever had in that world was dashed. Nobody would play my record. Nobody would, they just dismissed it completely and said, I don't understand what happened to her. But, the record itself just developed its own following. And I just went back out and started playing live and doing my thing and following my muse. And so I built up my own audience again, and here I am today.
Extra, extra, read all about it. If you're like me, and I'll bet you are, you like to be on the cutting edge of honest news and accurate information. 26 times a year, the American Free Press newspaper can be delivered to your door, packed with the kind of uncensored news that I know you're going to appreciate. If you're ever dissatisfied with your subscription to the American Free Press, their guarantee is that you just drop them an email and they will gladly refund the unused portion of your subscription. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.americanfreepress.net. Once again, www.americanfreepress.net. And find out about the American Free Press. Do it today.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Up until a month ago, I was working all the time, and I tour the country and make records, and people buy them, but no, that record changed the course of my musical professional future, basically. But in a funny way, it freed me, and so did my husband, to be more essentially who I am as a writer and performer. And because I didn't have to, there's a constriction involved with that sort of having to sort of have a hipster persona. You know, there's sort of, you have to kind of have to have an ironic attitude, and that's not really how I am. And I don't write that way, and I write the truest and best songs when I'm coming from my true self, my essential self, which I really never felt I could be. Being cast off by that world kind of freed me.
Hello, I'm Tom Strain, Lieutenant Commander-in-Chief of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. The Confederate flag, Confederate symbols, and the reputation of our Confederate ancestors has come under attack. The Sons of Confederate Veterans is actively fending off our detractors, but there is only so much that we can do. We need your help. Contact your local, state, and national elected politicians and tell them that you will not tolerate these attacks on our heritage. You can also visit scv.org, download an application to join us in our fight to preserve our Southern heritage. Visit scv.org today. If you don't have a Confederate ancestor and you are tired of American history disappearing, you can assist us by becoming a friend of the SCV. Please visit scvheritagedefense.org and make a donation to the Heritage Defense Fund. We hope that you will join us in the fight to defend the Confederate soldiers' good name.
You know?
Right.
And it just did. And my husband did that too. He encouraged me to just be more and more myself on stage, and just write from my own experience and who I am and everything. And God, I just started becoming so much more prolific after that. You know, I had writer's block for a long time before that, and I realized what it was. You know, I was putting a filter on everything I wrote, and once the filter was gone, like, who cares, you know? It was freeing. So it's so funny, isn't it, in life, that the things that seem the worst always end up having a really amazing, enduring gift inside them. Haven't you found that in your life?
That is true. That is very true. I know that
I think that anyway.
If you type my name into Amazon, I've written 32 books. And
oh my God!
Yeah,
oh, I had no idea.
And I had written, you know, I'd written 25 of them by 2008, and then from 2008 to 2016, you know, 8 years, I didn't write anything. It just wasn't there. Just, you know,
it just wasn't there. Yeah,
it just wasn't there. And I was coaching baseball. And then I ended up the president of the Little League, and then I, when my term was over, I was ended up on the Little League board. And one of the person who succeeded me as president, he told me, he said, Ed, you know, most of our coaches are just dads who don't have a clue on how to coach baseball. He said, you know, you should put something together that we can give these guys, you know, kind of a new coach's, you know, packet or something that'll kind of help them to, you know, to understand what they need to be doing and how to do it. And so he was thinking, you know, 12 or 14 pages that we would put in a folder. 289 pages and 35 chapters later, I handed him a book.
There you go.
And I was writing again. So... but you know, part of it was I was trying to write, you know, I was trying to write my next military biography, and you know, but once I kind of freed myself up to write on whatever I wanted to write on, it's happened again, and now I've been writing newspaper columns and magazine articles, and it's just I've been writing a lot in the last 4 years.
So you write about baseball and history? Oh, I'm going to have to look you up. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that. My agent didn't present you that way, so I had no idea. But now I'm going to look you up.
I wrote my first few books were theological books because I actually I have 2 doctorates. I have a doctorate in theology and then more recently a PhD in history. But my early books were theological books, and nobody bought them. And I wrote a War Between the States history quite on accident. And people started buying it like crazy, and I actually started making money. And so then I said, well, you know what? I'm going to write books that people are going to buy and that I'm going to make money on.
Oh my gosh. So you've actually written on Civil War history. Oh, now I have to. Oh, gosh. Yeah. Now I have to really look you up. And you should send me a link.
Okay, I will.
If you have please do.
Welcome to the Christendom curriculum. You know, every parent who decides to homeschool wants to secure a great education for their child, while also saving time and money. But these days, many parents have another concern. They also want a homeschool curriculum without all the multiculturalist, politically correct diversity doctrine that's really little more than a thin disguise for an anti-Christian, anti-American, and anti-Western civilization bias. Now there is such a curriculum. The Christendom curriculum gives your children a complete education in Bible, history, literature, and more, focusing on the classic academic skills of reading, writing, and arithmetic. But we also tell the story of Christendom, the story of the Christian nations, especially as Christ's kingdom has been historically manifest in the nations of Europe and America, and we do so without apology. The Christendom curriculum is the only Christian nationalist homeschool program you'll find. We support the right of the European and American peoples to their historic Christian cultures against the globalist leftists who want to destroy those cultures. Not only that, but we provide assigned reading courses for various hot-button subjects in our current culture wars, including feminism, social justice, and cultural Marxism, among others. These reading courses will teach your kids how to survive a social justice warrior attack, how to debate with leftists on social media, how to reform their local churches and communities, and more. We're living in a time of tremendous historical and social change. Christians have the opportunity now to begin building the culture and civilization of the next 1,000 years and beyond. It's an exciting time to be alive. So if you want to help raise the next generation of culture warriors, if you want your children to grow up with a love for Christ's kingdom and for their own nation, while at the same time learning how to defend America and rebuild the West, the easy-to-use Christendom curriculum is for you. Click the Learn More button to get in on the action. And thanks for listening.
Recently I've been writing on all kinds of things. I know for magazine articles I've been writing on World War II history and Korean War and other things as well. And so just not limiting myself, if you will, I guess you could say by allowing myself to, to be inspired in other areas, has really done a lot. Not trying to put myself into the box of what I think, I need to be writing.
Yeah, it takes some courage to do that, and you have some missteps at the beginning when you do anything, basically. But you have to have the courage to make the mistakes and write badly sometimes, or not get it quite right the first time. You just have to have the guts to do things. You do. That's interesting. It's also sometimes you run out of food. It's the other thing I try to encourage people to do too. It's like if you want to keep the creative juices flowing, you've got to feed your brain. You got to feed your soul with good things.
And we are out of time for this week's TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Show, so we're going to end the conversation right here, but we are going to pick it up again next week in this exact same place. Feeding the soul, a very, very important subject, and Mary and I are going to talk about it as we begin the broadcast next week. Until then, be sure to go to our website, www.dixieheritage.net. When you're there, request a copy of my free weekly newsletter. When you subscribe to it, I'll also send you a copy of my book, The Truth About the Confederate Battle Flag. You'll get both absolutely free of charge with no cost or no obligation. Also, go to Mary Fahl's website. I think you'll find it very interesting. There's some great music there, as well as some great biographical information about our guest, Mary Fahl. And so until this time next week, just be sure to come to the same time and same place again. Tune in. we'll be here, and we want you to join us. So until then, from all of us here at TBR Radio, God bless. See you next week.